My name is Eliza, and for 2 years, I lived and breathed a revolution. It wasn't televised, it was humming under the harsh fluorescent lights of a corporate lab at 3 in the morning. It smelled of ozone and stale coffee. This revolution was a battery, the Prometheus, a solid-state power source that was supposed to change the world, and I led the team that built it. Every breakthrough, every failed simulation, every single late night staring at cascading data until the numbers blurred into green rivers, that was all me. While I was doing that, my boss, Everett, was perfecting his golf swing with the board of directors. He was a master of the back nine, and I was a master of the clean room. He saw me as a quiet, useful tool, a high-performance cog in a machine he owned. He was wrong. If you've ever poured your soul into something only to have someone else sign their name at the bottom, then you know the quiet heat that flushed up my neck in that moment. You know what it feels like to be erased. If you know that feeling, hit that like button and let me know I'm not just screaming into the void here. It genuinely helps to know I'm not alone in this. The email arrived on a Tuesday. Not a call, not a meeting, not even the courtesy of a security guard escorting me out with a cardboard box. Just an email from Human Resources, with Everett copied, of course. The subject line was cold, efficient corporate speak, organizational restructuring. My position, senior project lead, was being eliminated for strategic realignment. It was a week before the patent for the Prometheus battery was scheduled to be filed. My patent, my work, my 2 years of sacrificed weekends and missed holidays. It was all being realigned right out from under me. I stared at the screen, my heart a cold, hard knot in my chest. I could see him in my mind's eye, leaning back in his leather chair, a smug little smile playing on his lips as he dictated the email to his assistant. He probably thought I'd just pack up my personal effects, update my resume, and disappear. He thought I was just a quiet scientist, someone who wouldn't fight back, who didn't understand the games he played in the C-suite. But here's the thing about spending thousands of hours in a lab. You learn that every system has a vulnerability, every structure has a load-bearing wall, and every battery has a fail-safe. He was right about one thing. I wouldn't fight back, not in the way he understood. I wouldn't be filing a lawsuit or making angry calls. That was his language, the language of noise and bluster. My language was data, it was code, and buried deep within the final data package for the Prometheus battery, the one I had personally compiled and encrypted just 3 days before my termination, was a little present I'd left for him. It was a poison pill, a tiny, elegant, non-catastrophic flaw embedded in the battery's management firmware. It was a ghost in the machine, a whisper in the code that instructed the battery to degrade its own capacity, to drain itself by a full 30% if it wasn't reset with a proprietary 256-character alphanumeric code every 100 hours. It was a key only I held. As their flagship product launch was about to unravel in a spectacular mess of consumer complaints and plummeting stock prices, the only person in the world who could fix it was me, the founder and sole employee of a brand new and very, very expensive tech consulting firm. The silence in my apartment that night was deafening. The termination email burned on my laptop screen, a single point of cruel light in the darkness. My body felt hollowed out, a fragile shell. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a deep, vibrating cold that started in my bones and worked its way out. I sat on my sofa, the one I'd bought on sale because I was saving every spare dollar, telling myself it was for a future that now felt like a cruel joke. The city lights outside my window, usually a source of comfort, felt alien and mocking. Millions of people out there, living their lives, completely unaware that my world had just been neatly and efficiently dismantled by a man who couldn't even tell the difference between lithium ion and a lithium polymer. My mind started to drift back, a torrent of memories I had meticulously compartmentalized. It was like a dam breaking. Flashbacks didn't come in a gentle stream. They came in a flood, a chaotic montage of disrespect and dismissal, each one a small paper cut that had finally bled me out. I remembered the first project meeting for Prometheus. I had the initial concept, the core chemistry, scrawled on a napkin from the company cafeteria. I'd worked on the base theory in my spare time for 6 months before I even pitched it. I walked into Everett's office, my heart pounding with nervous excitement. He'd listened with a bored expression, nodding along, his eyes glazed over. But then when I got to the part about the potential market valuation, his eyes lit up, not with the fire of innovation, but with the cold glint of opportunity. He saw dollar signs. I saw the future. He said, "Good work, Eliza. Let's put a pin in that." A week later, he presented my napkin-scribbled idea to the board as a strategic initiative he had been developing. My name wasn't mentioned. That was the first cut. I told myself it didn't matter. It wasn't about the credit. It was about the work. It was about building the thing, about seeing it come to life. That's the lie we tell ourselves, isn't it? The lie of the pure creator, who is above such petty things as recognition. But it's not petty. Recognition is currency. It's leverage. It's power. And he was hoarding all of it. Another memory surfaced. It was a Saturday around midnight. We had hit a major wall with thermal regulation. The prototype was running dangerously hot, threatening to cascade into a critical failure. The entire project was on the line. I was in the lab with Marcus, my junior engineer, a brilliant kid with more passion than experience. We were running on fumes, and the terrible coffee from the machine down the hall. My phone buzzed. It was an automated social media notification, a picture of Everett, grinning holding a golf club at some sunny resort in Scottsdale. The caption read, "Another tough day at the office. #work hard, play hard." A quiet, bitter rage filled me. I looked at Marcus, his face pale with exhaustion, and I saw the same disillusionment in his eyes. We didn't say anything. We just turned back to the monitors. We solved the problem at 4 a.m. On Monday morning, Everett sent a company-wide email congratulating his team for working tirelessly over the weekend to overcome a minor technical hurdle. He made it sound like we'd fixed a jammed printer. Why did I stay? It's a fair question. People on the outside would call it weakness. They'd say I should have walked out years ago. But it's more complicated when you're on the inside. It's debatable logic, I know, but my reasons felt real at the time. First there was the team. There was Marcus. He'd joined right out of college, and I'd mentored him, watched him grow from a nervous intern into a confident engineer. He believed in the project. But more importantly, he believed in me. Leaving felt like abandoning him. It felt like proving Everett right, that I was just a temporary asset, not a leader. Then there was the work itself. Prometheus was my baby. I had conceived it, nurtured it, and I was so close to seeing it walk on its own. To abandon it before it was born felt like a betrayal of my own creativity, my own intellect. I convinced myself that once the battery was launched, once its success was undeniable, my contribution would have to be acknowledged. The truth would come out, the work would speak for itself. It was a naive hope, a form of professional Stockholm syndrome. I was loyal to the project, not the company that was exploiting it. And there was another, darker reason I stayed. I was watching him. I was gathering data, every condescending comment, every stolen idea, every atta-girl pat on the head. I filed it away. It wasn't a conscious plan for revenge, not at first. It was a survival mechanism. It was me observing a predator in its natural habitat, learning its patterns, its weaknesses. He was arrogant. He was lazy, and he was utterly dependent on people he refused to value. That was his fatal flaw, and I was documenting it with the same precision I used to document my experiments. It wasn't about revenge, it was about seeing the whole equation. The memory that finally broke me that night, the one that turned the cold grief into a diamond-hard point of resolve, was a simple one. It was from about a year in. We'd had a small celebration in the lab for securing the second round of funding. Everett had brought in a cheap sheet cake. He was giving a speech, full of his usual empty corporate platitudes about synergy and teamwork. He gestured towards me and said, "And of course none of this would be possible without Eliza, who keeps all the trains running on time. A real workhorse. A workhorse. Not a visionary. Not an architect. Not a leader. A beast of burden." The word hung in the air. I saw the flicker of pity in Marcus's eyes before he looked down at his shoes. The other engineers, all men Everett had hired, just smiled and clapped. In that moment, I felt profoundly, utterly alone. I felt like a ghost at my own party. Sitting there in my dark apartment, that word echoed in my head, workhorse. I closed my laptop. The glow from the screen vanished, plunging the room into near total blackness. The city lights outside seemed to sharpen. I stood up and walked over to my bookshelf. Behind a row of dense textbooks on electrochemical engineering, there was a small, fireproof safe. I hadn't opened it in over a year. I spun the dial, the soft clicks sounding like gunshots in the silent room. Inside was a single manila folder and a hard drive. The folder contained the original, hand-signed incorporation documents for a limited liability company called Phoenix Engineering Solutions, registered to my home address. I had created it 2 years ago, right after Everett stole my initial pitch. It was a break glass in case of emergency plan. The hard drive contained my real work, my personal, meticulously annotated logs, my original theoretical models, and every single email and document that proved my sole authorship of the Prometheus project. It was my truth, encrypted and offline. I picked up the folder and sat back down. Stamped on the front, in simple block letters, was the name of my new consulting firm. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal. It was real. It had been real all along. Waiting in the dark, the cold in my bones wasn't grief anymore. It was steel. The despair wasn't a weight, it was fuel. Everett thought he had eliminated his workhorse. He had no idea. He had just unleashed a dragon. He had taken my name off the patent, but I had embedded mine in the code. He wanted a war of attrition, of lawsuits and HR policies. He was about to find himself in a war of logic, of systems and consequences. A war he couldn't possibly win, because he didn't even know he was fighting it. It wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring balance to the universe. The first step was to build a fortress, not of brick and mortar, but of data and legal precedent. Everett and his company, Innovate Dynamics, operated in a world of handshakes on the golf course and vague promises made over expensive steak dinners. I was about to drag them into my world, a world of immutable logs, cryptographic signatures, and ironclad contracts. My apartment, once a sanctuary of quiet despair, transformed into a war room. The coffee table became a command center, covered in legal pads, my personal laptop, and the now liberated hard drive from my safe. The first night was about architecture, designing the structure of my new reality. My foresight, born from that initial betrayal 2 years ago, was paying off. Registering Phoenix Engineering Solutions had been an act of pure instinctual self-preservation. It cost a few $100s, and an afternoon of filling out online forms. At the time it felt almost silly, like a child playing dress-up. But now, it was the bedrock of everything. It was a legal entity, separate from me, Eliza the person, the recently fired employee. It was a shield and a weapon. I spent hours that night meticulously curating the contents of the hard drive. I wasn't just dumping files, I was building a narrative. I created a timeline, linking my personal research notes, dated and time-stamped by the original file metadata, to specific breakthroughs in the project's official development log. I highlighted emails where I had proposed solutions that Everett later presented as his own. I cross-referenced my simulation data with the flawed results from the main lab, proving that my private, off-network work was what had consistently solved the project's biggest hurdles. It was an unassailable digital paper trail. This wasn't just a collection of files, it was the project's true genesis story, and my name was on every page. This was my leverage, the hidden foundation of the entire Prometheus project. Here's a detail that the lawyers at Innovate Dynamics would later find maddeningly debatable. The company's employment agreement stated that all intellectual property created on company time, using company resources, belonged to them. Standard stuff, but I had read the fine print. There was a clause, buried in legalese, about final compilation. My argument, which my lawyer would later call aggressively creative, was that while the components were developed on their time, the final functional data package, the one with the poison pill, was compiled on my personal laptop in my apartment at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. I had used a private, open-source compiler. Was this legally sound? Honestly, it was a gray area the size of Texas. It was designed not necessarily to win in court, but to create enough doubt, to tie them in knots for years, costing them millions in legal fees. It was a plausible inaccuracy that would make their legal team's heads spin. It was a threat. But a fortress needs more than just walls, it needs allies. My first call was not to a lawyer, but to Marcus. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight with anxiety. He said, "Eliza, what the hell is going on? They're saying you're gone." I told him it was true. I listened as he swore, a string of curses directed at Everett and the entire corporate structure. I heard the genuine anger and loyalty in his voice, and it was like a balm on a raw wound. He told me they had called him into Everett's office that afternoon. Everett, all fake sympathy and predatory benevolence, had offered him my job. He'd offered him the title of senior project lead, a corner office, and a 20% raise. He told Marcus it was his time to step up, to be a team player. Marcus told me he just stared at him. He said he felt sick. He was just a kid, barely 25, with a mountain of student loan debt. His parents back in Ohio were so proud of him, working at this big, important tech company. Turning down that offer was not a small thing for him. It was a life-altering decision. He told Everett he needed time to think. He told me he didn't need any time at all. He said, "I know who built Prometheus. We all do. What do I do, Eliza?" I told him to sit tight, to keep his head down, to do his job, and to be my eyes and ears. He was my insider. I told him not to quit. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. His departure had to be a strategic blow, not just a personal statement. He agreed. He became my mole, my most crucial asset inside the enemy camp. His loyalty was a currency more valuable than any funding round. My next call was to Dr. Eris Thorne. Eris was my mentor from graduate school, a legend in the field of materials science. She was a woman who had navigated the brutal male-dominated world of academic and corporate research for 40 years. She had faced 100 Everetts and had not just survived but thrived. She ran her own research institute now, a titan in the industry. I hadn't spoken to her in a year, caught up in the vortex of the Prometheus project. I laid out the whole story, from the stolen credit to the termination email to the poison pill. I expected a lecture, maybe an "I told you so." Instead, she was silent for a long moment. Then she let out a low laugh. It wasn't a sound of humor. It was a sound of deep, weary recognition. She said, "Eliza, welcome to the club." They never see it coming from the quiet ones, do they? They mistake focus for passivity. They mistake patience for weakness. She didn't question my methods. She didn't warn me about the risks. She validated my anger, and then immediately channeled it into strategy. She said, "So, this Phoenix Engineering Solutions, is it just a name on a piece of paper, or is it a business?" I told her, "Right now, it's just a name." She said, "Good. A blank slate. Let's make it a very, very expensive business." She was the one who gave me the final piece of the puzzle, the price. She told me not to think like a fired employee, asking for severance. She told me to think like a sole source provider of a mission-critical component. She said, "Don't ask for a settlement. Don't ask for your job back. Create a contract, a consulting agreement. You're not Eliza, the disgruntled scientist. You are Phoenix Engineering, the only firm in the world with the expertise to solve a catastrophic product-killing flaw in the Prometheus battery. Your fee should be obscene. It should be painful. It should include not just a lump sum, but a percentage of the patent royalties. Not a one-time payment, but a permanent tax on their arrogance. She told me to aim for a number that made me uncomfortable, and then double it. That, she said, is your starting point. The conversation with Eris was the catalyst. It solidified my resolve. It gave my plan a name and a price tag. It transformed me from a victim into a vendor. I spent the next few days building the infrastructure. I hired a lawyer Eris recommended, a shark who specialized in intellectual property disputes. I explained the final compilation loophole to her. She grinned. She said, "Oh, this is going to be fun." We drafted the Master Services Agreement, a work of art in its precision and ruthlessness. It outlined the scope of work, diagnosis and resolution of firmware-level power management anomalies. It specified the fee structure, exactly as Eris had suggested. It included clauses on non-disclosure, liability, and most importantly, a formal public acknowledgement of my role as the principal architect of the Prometheus technology. While the lawyers were sharpening their knives, I was preparing for the final phase of the silent takeover. I knew the product launch was imminent. Innovate Dynamics was pouring millions into a massive marketing campaign. The hype was building. Tech journalists were writing breathless articles about the game-changing battery. Everett was on the cover of a trade magazine, hailed as a visionary. I read the article, a nauseating piece of PR fluff, and felt nothing but a cold, calm certainty. He was flying higher and higher, completely unaware that I had already cut the strings on his parachute. I called Marcus one last time before the launch. He told me the atmosphere in the office was electric. They were having a launch party, champagne and all. Everett was walking around like he had personally invented fire. Marcus sounded disgusted. He said they were already talking about Prometheus 2.0, and Everett was taking meetings with automotive companies. The arrogance was breathtaking. I told Marcus to enjoy the party, and to keep his phone charged. The first 100 hours were about to begin. The world was watching Innovate Dynamics, expecting a revolution. They were about to get one, just not the one they were paying for. It wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. A system I had designed was about to correct a flaw in a system Everett had built. It was all just a matter of code. The launch of the Helios, the first smartphone powered by the Prometheus battery, was a media spectacle. Innovate Dynamics had partnered with a major electronics manufacturer, and the initial rollout was flawless. The first wave of reviews was ecstatic. "A quantum leap in power," one headline blared. "The forever battery is finally here," another proclaimed. I watched from my apartment, a silent observer to my own ghost's triumph. Everett was everywhere, on tech blogs, on cable news, his face beaming, soaking in the credit. He spoke of his team's tireless dedication. He used words like synergy and disruption. He was a king presiding over a kingdom built on my foundations. For the first 99 hours, his victory was absolute. I didn't feel anger or jealousy. I felt a strange sense of detachment, like a physicist watching an experiment unfold, knowing the exact moment the variables would shift. My poison pill wasn't a bomb, it was a slow-acting chemical agent. It was designed to be subtle at first, to mimic a common, frustrating user experience. It was designed to create doubt before it created panic. Marcus was my live feed from the inside. His texts came in sporadic bursts. Day 1, launch party was insane. Everett actually popped a bottle of champagne over the server rack. The IT guys almost had a heart attack. Day 2, first sales numbers are through the roof. They're projecting $1 billion in revenue by Q4. The whole office is buzzing. Day 3, first few user complaints are trickling in on the forums. The usual stuff. People saying the battery life isn't quite what was advertised. The support team is just brushing it off as user error. This was it. The beginning. The slow drain wasn't immediately obvious. A user wouldn't notice a 30% drop right away. They'd just feel a vague sense of disappointment. Their phone, which was supposed to last for days, would need a charge after just one. It was a psychological masterpiece of a flaw. It didn't break the product, it just broke the promise. Then the 100-hour mark hit. It was a Friday afternoon. Across the globe, tens of thousands of Helios phones, all activated around the same time, crossed a silent, invisible threshold. My code, a simple if-then statement buried under layers of benign diagnostic routines, executed its payload. It wasn't a crash, it was a throttle. It artificially capped the battery's maximum charge capacity. 30% of its revolutionary power, gone, vanished into the ether. The trickle of complaints on the user forums became a stream, then a river, then a flood. Battery drain disaster. Helios phone a scam. My 3-day battery lasts 8 hours. The tech world, which had been so quick to praise, was even quicker to turn. Influential tech reviewers, who had given the Helios glowing recommendations, started posting follow-up videos. They showed screenshots of the battery life plummeting. They ran diagnostic tools that showed the battery's reported capacity was far lower than advertised. The narrative shifted in a matter of hours from revolution to recall. Marcus's texts became more frantic. "It's a bloodbath, Eliza. The support call center is completely overwhelmed. They've pulled engineers from every department to try and figure it out. No one has a clue. Everett is losing his mind. He's screaming at everyone. He's demanding to know why the quality controls team didn't catch this." The head of QC just stared at him and said, "It passed every single diagnostic we have." Of course it did. The diagnostics were designed to check for hardware failures, for chemical degradation. They weren't designed to look for a deliberately coded self-sabotage routine, disguised as a data integrity check. They were looking for a flaw in the body, but the sickness was in the soul. The real panic at Innovate Dynamics began on Monday morning. Their stock, which had soared on the launch news, opened 15% down. By noon, it was down by 30%. Their manufacturing partner was on the phone, demanding answers. Major retail chains were threatening to pull the product. The Helios phone was becoming a punchline. Everett, according to Marcus, had locked himself in the boardroom with the lead engineers. They were tearing the firmware apart, line by line. But they were looking in all the wrong places. They were analyzing the power management module, the charging algorithms, the core operating system interface. They were looking for a bug. They would never find it, because it wasn't a bug, it was a feature only I knew about. The reset code was a 256-character string, derived from the SHE-256 hash of the first paragraph of my original project proposal, the one I had written on that cafeteria napkin. It was a piece of data that existed only in my memory and on my encrypted hard drive. It was literary, poetic, and completely untraceable. My first move was quiet, almost imperceptible. I didn't send a letter or make a call to Innovate Dynamics. That would be too direct, too obvious. Instead, I reached out to one person, James Kendrick, the CEO of the electronics company that had manufactured the Helios phone. I knew James. Not well, but we had met a few times during the initial partnership negotiations. He was a sharp, no-nonsense engineer by trade who had built his company from the ground up. He respected competence above all else. During one meeting, while Everett was pontificating about market share, James had pulled me aside and asked a deeply technical question about the battery's anode composition. He had listened intently to my answer, and I saw a flicker of genuine respect in his eyes. He knew who the real architect was. I sent him an email from my new Phoenix engineering address. It was short and to the point. Subject: Helios power anomalies, Mr. Kendrick. I believe I have identified the root cause of the power management issues in the Prometheus battery firmware. My firm, Phoenix Engineering Solutions, specializes in complex firmware diagnostics. I am confident we can provide a definitive solution. Regards, Eliza Vance, founder, Phoenix Engineering Solutions. I didn't mention my history with Innovate Dynamics. I didn't need to. James was a smart man. He would connect the dots. The email was a seed. I sent it, closed my laptop, and waited. The response came less than an hour later. It wasn't an email, it was a direct call to my cell phone. His voice was grim. He said, "Eliza, James Kendrick, I'm glad you called. We have a 5-alarm fire over here. Everett is feeding me nonsense about sunspots and software patches. He has no idea what's going on, does he?" "No, James, he doesn't," I replied, my voice calm and even. "Can you fix it?" he asked, the question stripped of all corporate politeness. It was raw and direct. "Yes, I can," I said. A press release hit the newswire that afternoon. It wasn't from me, it was from James Kendrick's company. It announced that they were pausing all future production of the Helios phone and had retained an independent third-party engineering firm, Phoenix Engineering Solutions, to conduct a full audit of the Prometheus battery technology. The inclusion of my firm's name was a strategic masterstroke by James. It was a public vote of no confidence in Everett. It was a shot across the bow, and it was my official entrance onto the battlefield. Not as a fired employee, but as the cavalry. Marcus called me a minute after the press release went public. He was whispering, hiding in a supply closet. "The office is in total meltdown." Everett saw the press release. He threw his laptop against the wall. He knows it's you." The silence on the other end of the line was filled with a new kind of energy. The panic had a name now. It was mine. The exodus began with a single email. It was from Kenji Tanaka, the head of product development at a major electric vehicle startup. They had been in late-stage talks with Innovate Dynamics to use the Prometheus battery for their next-generation sports car. It was a deal worth hundreds of millions, a deal Everett had bragged about constantly. Kenji and I had developed a strong professional rapport during the technical evaluations. He, like James Kendrick, was an engineer first and a suit second. He cared about how things worked. His email to me, sent to my new Phoenix engineering address, was brief. "Eliza, read the news. Is your firm taking on new clients? Let's talk." It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. He was abandoning Everett's sinking ship and swimming towards my lifeboat. The phone call with Kenji was a stark contrast to the frantic, panicked energy coming from Innovate Dynamics. He was calm, analytical. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't need to. He just said, "We can't risk our entire product line on a technology that is fundamentally unstable. Everett's team can't even diagnose the problem, let alone fix it. You can. We want to work with you. The deal with Innovate is dead." That was the first major blow. The loss of a flagship B2B client, publicly and decisively. The news, when it inevitably leaked to the trade press, was devastating for Everett. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the narrative. The story was no longer about a brilliant company with a flawed product. It was about a brilliant scientist who had left and taken the magic with her. Then came the second blow, the one that was more personal. Marcus called me that evening. His voice was steady, resolute. "I just did it," he said. I walked into Everett's office and gave my 2 weeks' notice. I could picture the scene perfectly. Everett, already frayed and humiliated, being confronted by the quiet, loyal junior engineer he had tried to buy off. Marcus told me Everett didn't even yell. He just looked at him with a kind of dead, hollow expression. He asked him where he was going. Marcus looked him right in the eye and said, "I'm going to work for someone who respects the work." He didn't have to say my name. Marcus's departure was more than just the loss of an employee. He was the most knowledgeable person on the Prometheus project still inside that building. He was the institutional memory. With him gone, they were truly flying blind. He was the first official employee of Phoenix Engineering Solutions. The inevitable desperate countermove from Everett came 2 days later. It was a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from Everett's personal assistant, her voice strained. "Eliza, Mr. Vance needs to speak with you urgently. It's about your future at Innovate Dynamics." My future. The arrogance was still there, even in his desperation. He still thought of me as one of his assets, a piece on his chessboard that he could simply move back into place. A formal offer arrived by email an hour later, this time from Everett himself. It was a masterpiece of panicked capitulation. He offered me my job back, with the new title of Chief Technology Officer. He offered me a salary that was triple my old one. He offered me a corner office, a massive bonus, and stock options that would have made me a millionaire on paper. He wrote about misunderstandings and restructuring missteps. He said he had always valued my contributions. I read the email twice, a cold, clinical smile on my face. A week ago, this offer would have been a dream come true. Now it was an insult. He wasn't offering me power. He was trying to buy my silence. He was trying to put his ghost back in the machine. He still didn't understand. I didn't want a seat at his table. I was building my own. I forwarded his email to my lawyer with a single line, "Please handle this." Her reply was almost instantaneous. With pleasure, she sent back a formal rejection of his offer on Phoenix Engineering letterhead. It was polite, professional, and utterly brutal. It stated that I was fully committed to the success of my own firm and was not available for outside employment. It then, as a professional courtesy, attached a copy of our standard master services agreement and a schedule of our consulting fees, should Innovate Dynamics wish to engage our services to solve their ongoing technical challenges. Putting the contract in front of him was the real checkmate. He had tried to offer me a job. I was offering to sell him a solution. It was a fundamental power shift. He was no longer my boss. He was a potential client, a very desperate, very flammable client. The silent takeover was nearly complete. The choice was his: let his company burn to the ground, or pay the woman he had erased to come back and put out the fire. The call came from their general counsel. His name was Arthur, a man with a tired, gravelly voice who sounded like he'd rather be anywhere else. He didn't bother with pleasantries. He said, "Miss Vance, we have received your firm's proposal. The terms are unconventional." I stayed silent. The first person to speak loses. That's a rule in negotiation, and it's a rule in physics. Vacuums get filled. I let the silence stretch, the weight of it pressing down on his end of the line. Finally he sighed. A deep, defeated sound. He said, "Everett Vance and the board have authorized us to engage Phoenix Engineering Solutions to resolve the issue. We accept your terms. All of them. All of them." That included the 7-figure upfront fee for the diagnostic. It included the ongoing percentage of all future royalties from the Prometheus patent, and it included the public acknowledgement of my role as the technology's principal architect. He had tried to erase my name, and now he was legally obligated to carve it in stone. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the integrity of the historical record. The final confrontation wasn't in a sterile boardroom. It was in the lab, my lab. Arthur had insisted on a neutral site, but I refused. I told him the work had to be done on site, with direct access to the core hardware. It was a power play, and he knew it, but he had no cards left to play. I walked through the doors of Innovate Dynamics for the first time since I'd been fired. The security guard at the front desk, a friendly guy named Sal, just nodded at me. He didn't need to see a badge. The entire company knew who I was now. I walked down the hallways, and people averted their eyes. The air of celebration was gone, replaced by a thick, anxious gloom. It was a company holding its breath. The lab was exactly as I had left it, only now it felt like an archaeological site. Marcus was with me, not as a junior engineer, but as my colleague. He carried a single matte black laptop case. My new laptop. Everett was there. He was standing by the main diagnostic console, looking smaller than I remembered. His expensive suit was rumpled. His face was pale, his eyes sunken. The swagger was gone, replaced by a brittle, hollowed-out look. Arthur, the lawyer, stood beside him, looking grim. Everett didn't look at me. He stared at the floor, at the walls, anywhere but at me. I walked over to the console, the familiar hum of the equipment, a welcome sound. I didn't say hello. I just got to work. I opened my laptop and connected it to their system. Marcus stood behind me, a silent, imposing presence. I typed for a few minutes, navigating through firewalls and security protocols that felt like old, familiar pathways. They hadn't even bothered to change my administrative access. A rookie mistake. I brought up the core firmware file. I showed Arthur the section of code, the part that was disguised as a data integrity routine. I said, "The flaw is here. It's a recursive loop that triggers a throttle on the power cell's output after 100 hours of continuous uptime. It can only be deactivated by a specific reset key." Arthur squinted at the screen, not understanding a word of it, but understanding the finality in my tone. Everett finally spoke. His voice was a hoarse whisper. "Why?" I stopped typing, but I didn't turn to look at him. I stared at the screen, at the lines of code that represented 2 years of my life. I thought about his golf trips, the condescending pats on the head, the stolen credit, the word workhorse. I thought about the cold, impersonal email that had tried to turn me into a footnote. I finally turned my head and met his gaze. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of the board, or the stock price, or the angry customers. It was the fear of a man who has just realized he picked a fight with someone whose weapons he can't even comprehend. I thought about all the things I could say. I could have screamed at him. I could have listed every single one of his betrayals. But that would have been his language. Noise. Bluster. Instead, I gave him a calm, quiet, surgical strike. I used his own words against him. I said, "I was just ensuring the long-term strategic alignment of the project, Everett." His face crumpled. He understood. It was the exact phrase from my termination email. It was a perfect, elegant loop. I had taken the weapon he had used to execute my career and turned it back on him. I turned back to the laptop. I pasted the 256-character reset code into the command line and hit enter. The system accepted it. A small message appeared on the screen. Power management throttle deactivated. All systems nominal. It was over. I closed my laptop and stood up. I looked at Arthur. I said, "My firm will send a remote software patch to all Helios devices within the hour. The batteries will recalibrate to full capacity on their next charge cycle. You'll have a full report on your desk in the morning." I then turned and walked out of the lab, Marcus right behind me. I didn't look back. The news came a week later, not through a secret call from Marcus, but in a public press release. The board of Innovate Dynamics had voted to remove Everett Vance as CEO, effective immediately. He was gone, erased, a consequence of his own actions. The system had corrected itself. My new office doesn't have a view of the city. It has a view of a clean room, a real one, with my name on the door. Phoenix Engineering Solutions now occupies a state-of-the-art research facility, funded by the very healthy consulting fees from our first few clients. Kenji Tanaka's EV company is our flagship partner. Marcus is now my director of engineering. We're working on something new, something better than Prometheus. On my desk, I have a small, simple frame. It's not a picture of my family or a diploma. It's a printout of that first email from Everett's assistant, the one offering me the CTO job. It's a reminder that my value is not determined by the title someone else is willing to give me. It's determined by what I can build. The foundation of this new company wasn't built on anger. It was built on competence. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reality. The reality is, a person's worth isn't in their job title, it's in their work. and my work now finally speaks for itself. And that's the real moral of this story. It's not about getting even. It's about getting what you're worth. It's about understanding that the power others have over you is often something you've loaned them. You can always take it back. Many of you watching this have been in a similar situation. You've been underestimated, you've been overlooked, you've had your ideas stolen by someone with a fancier title and a bigger office. You are not a workhorse. You are not a cog in someone else's machine. You are the architect. You are the visionary. And your work, your value, is your own. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. The world is full of Everetts. They thrive in the dark, they take what isn't theirs, and they count on your silence. But they have a fatal flaw. They don't know how to build anything. They only know how to take. People who build, people like you and me, we have the ultimate power. The power to create, and the power to create a new reality for ourselves. One where our names are on our own work, where our value is recognized, and where we are in control. So build your fortress, find your allies, and know with absolute certainty what you are worth. And then when the time comes, don't be afraid to send the invoice. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like your voice was being silenced, please do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Leave a comment below and share your own story of being underestimated. Let's create a community here where we can validate and support each other. Every like, every share, every comment, it helps more than you know. It tells the algorithm that these stories matter, that our stories matter. Thank you for listening.